Welcome in. I'm Corso. Catone is here. Joe is with us in the booth, and this is the Pats Nation. Welcome into the Pats Nation, and you are watching us on YouTube, listening on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, 790 The Score in Rhode Island. And hey, make sure you give us a heated call and heated hotline, 855-313-PATS, P-A-T-S, 24/7. It's a message line. Have a take. Joe's going to pick one. Let's hope it's yours. So you can also, Joe, they can email us in our mailbag, can't they? So
they can.
And so make sure you do that, corso.catone@gmail.com. Make sure when you get on there and YouTube, subscribe. Give us that thumbs up. Follow us so you never, ever, ever miss an episode. Hey, today we have a special one. You know, we're continuing our top 5 series and doing a lot of top 5 series, Mark.
I like these top 5 series. They're fun. Right?
They are.
Get to see it. And surprisingly, we've had a couple of off numbers. You might have somebody at 4. I got somebody at 3, but I'm surprised we're pretty similar in the names we've been coming up with and the things we've been coming up with for top,
I'm a little surprised. I'm more surprised that Joe hasn't really been out of left field. You know,
no, Joe's been excellent.
I try to come out of left field. I certainly do.
Yeah. Well, you haven't.
And Joe has had some good insights with some of the different people he's put or teams he's put in there. His insights.
Joe, I don't know if these are compliments more or sort of insults.
Should I be reading really into this or, you guys.
Talk about backhanded, huh?
What?
Well, today is.
You're an idiot, but you could.
Well,
come on, Joe.
Let's see how he does today, because today we're going to be talking about our top 5 Patriot teams of all time.
Oh, boy.
This is tough. This is a tough one.
It was tough, man.
Well, considering you've won 6 Super Bowls, so automatically one of them's not going to be there if that's what you're going by.
Right. You've won 6, and then we're talking about franchise history. You've won 6 of them, and you've been to how many? 9, 10, 11?
11.
You've been to 11 Super Bowls in history, and you've won 6 of them.
And we're going to pick only 5 teams.
And I don't know if it's always going to be. Is it always going to be a Super Bowl winning team? I'm not sure about that.
Well, does that qualify you? Does it have to be a ring involved? I don't know.
Well, we're going to see.
Has been what my 5 are. That's how I've left all these top 5s to say which one's my 5. Obviously, with Ted Williams being number 2 on a previous episode.
That still is not even believable, but that's another issue.
Yeah, that was out of left field too. So, so we'll see, and we're going to see about it right now. We're going to start right off the bat. Let's just get right into it, and we're going to go numbers 5 and 4. Okay, in this first segment, and so let's start with Mark. And by the way, just so you know, I was already right here, right off the bat. I was already 2 teams trying to figure out which one. Yeah, but go ahead, Mark. Who do you have?
Okay, so this was interesting. This was a tough one, but. I went with, after much deliberation, and I'm going to explain to you why I went with this team. I went with the 0-1 Patriots as my 5th team. Now, I'll explain to you why. So, I believe that this team is where the Patriot way and that whole mantra started, because Bledsoe goes out. It's that next man up mentality. Brady steps in. Never gives the mantle back to Bledsoe, leads them to a Super Bowl. But it was like that whole next 20 years was next man up, no excuses. They come out of the Super Bowl as a team, that whole team, the Patriot way. We're a team. It ain't about the individual. They had, this was also, Chris, I think the beginning of that bend don't break mindset too, of so they were 24th total defense, that team, Chris, in the league. Total defense, they were 24th. They were 19th in total offense that year. But then when you flip it, they were 6th in scoring offense. Okay? And on defense, they were a little bit better than 19th as well. But it was like that bend, don't break type of defense that you started to see in 0-1. I just think that team epitomized what we became for the next 20 years, and I had to put them. I had to put them on the list 5.
I don't have them on the list.
Okay, no,
I-
that's just my
I
personal
don't have
opinion because I
2001
think
on the list.
I think that's where the Patriot way started in my mind because of
So-
everything that happened that year.
Well, see, I was looking at this like it's supposed to be, which was who are the best teams of all time.
Wait. You can't say it's supposed to be because you put no rules in there.
There's no realistic.
Because you
And
don't-
I just
listen,
thought the
but
top.
I do think this was one of their. This team had to fight and the
Yeah,
grit,
you're right.
and this team, Chris, would overcome any obstacle to win, and they
Yeah.
did. And
But
that's why
I get why you would do that.
That's
I,
why I put
see,
them
the
fifth.
thing is, I agree with you. I
Oh.
have them as my 5. So, Chris, what's your number 5? Because
well,
obviously-
Joe, you got to. Do you have any
have the same one.
particular points to that, or just you got them 5 because of the same kind of thing?
Well, the same reasons, but I think that I think the dynasty began here.
Yeah.
And I like, yeah.
I think a lot of people would feel that way, honestly. And I will say this. We don't really – the title of the show isn't top 5 the best Patriots teams of all time. It's top 5 Patriot teams. So I guess that's open to interpretation as far as what makes them the top Patriot team. And I get your argument here, Mark. It's
They
you know,
beat the
this is where it
greatest
began.
They beat the greatest show on turf.
Yeah, they could play no defense.
You know,
No,
They still
you're
beat
right.
the greatest show on turf.
It's and I will say this. I'll add this footnote to the 2001 before I get to my 5. Under the circumstances, I've never seen a football season that had more adversity, and it actually kind of mirrored what we were all dealing with in the country. I mean, again, football is football. What was happening on 9/11 was, you don't compare sports to that. My point is the Patriots faced a lot of adversity that year, and they just happened to be named Patriot, red, white, and blue, their colors, and it just was appropriate. And that to me would factor in somewhat too, Mark, I think.
Yeah, no,
for what happened.
absolutely.
My number 5 team is the 1985 Patriots team. Now,
Okay.
let me just say why, okay? So, because I doubt this is on either one of your lists. I would be surprised if it is.
This was my tie for 5, but
Okay. Well, this was a tie for me for 2016 in this team.
wow.
85 teams. So, I mean, the numbers, okay, they were 10th offensively out of 28 teams. At the time, there were only 28 teams. And in defensively, they were 6th, okay? They were 11-5. They made it to the Super Bowl. They got destroyed in the Super Bowl by the Chicago
Perry.
right, by the Chicago Bears. I think it was 46-10, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But when you look at this team, Mark, okay, and the type of players that they had, and they had Hall of Famers on this team. They had Andre Tippett. They had John Hanna, some of the best position players. If I take out the Chicago Bears just for a minute, okay? If I take that out, I think it was hold on, 46, yeah. This is the best defense in football. I mean, this 85 Patriots team with, like I said, Tippett, Garen Veras, you had Lepet, you had Raymond Claiborne, you had Marion, you had Blackman, you had these guys on defense that just brought it. And every single week they were one of the best teams against the run. They were able to defend in the secondary, like Julius Adams and these guys, Steve Nelson, another all-time Patriot guy. I thought they had 2 of the best corners in football at the time, when they played. And I'm a little biased with Raymond Claiborne because he's my favorite player of all time. And so when I look at this team, again, any other year, squish the fish. Nobody thought they could do it with Marino down there, and they went in and they got it done. I think they made some mistakes when they played Tony Eason over Grogan. I think things would have been a little different. But when you break this team down and you look at all the Patriots teams of all time, it's tough because you go way back. You have to go way, way back. But to me, I think this is the number 5 team, and they didn't win a Super Bowl. But you take Chicago out, they're the best team in football probably for those couple of few years, in my opinion. So that's my number 5 team. You surprised?
No, well, not really. No, because they were on my list, believe it or not. And when we get through our top 5, I'm gonna tell you who I almost put number 5, and you're gonna be very surprised at the end of this when I tell you who was very close to being number 5.
96?
You'd never guess it. No, but I'll tell you.
Okay. So let's
No.
get to number 4 then, Mark. What do you got?
Number 4, I had the 2014 Patriots.
As did I.
And that was the on the Cincinnati team, obviously the famous quote, right? But this was, this was Brady coming back from suspension, and they're 2-2, and this was the year everybody thought that the skills were diminishing, and you talked about adversity with the 0-1 team. Well, this team faced adversity as well, obviously, with Brady not playing the first 4 games and that whole thing. But listen, people forget, Chris, how good that Seattle team actually was. They had humiliated Peyton Manning the year before. The Patriots, after that 2-2 stop, Chris, rolled through the league. After that 2-2 stop, Brady comes back and they roll. They get to the Super Bowl. You're facing, arguably, Chris, one of the top 5 or 6 defenses maybe in the history of the NFL over a 2-year run, right? They were so dominant. They humiliate Manning. Brady throws for 328 yards, 4 touchdowns against the Legion of Boom. And I know Pete Carroll, all he's going to do is turn and give them all a Marshawn Lynch. Maybe it's a different outcome. I get all of that. But this team, Chris, after the 2-2 start, it was so dominant. And I just had them as number 4.
I had him at number 4 as well, Mark. Not a ton of Pro Bowlers on this team. They never really did have a ton of Pro Bowlers on this team. Obviously, Brady. You had Gronkowski, and you had Darrelle Revis. And this was the team that they brought in some guys to solidify that defense.
And Chris, they paid Revis a bunch of money that year to bring him in.
Yeah, that's the year they brought in Revis and Browner.
Yep.
If you remember.
Yep.
And that defense was solidified there. They were a hell of a good defense. The rankings, let me take a look here. So they were 8th in the league in defense, and they were 4th in offense. Now they've been better on offense over the years, but number 4 is pretty damn good. They were 12-4 that year, as you say. Deflategate, which was ridiculous because they won 45-7 in that game. And at the half, I think he threw 2 more touchdowns in the second half. It was stupid, But when you go down the list, this was when Gronkowski. This was the start, basically, of that Gronkowski run.
Yes.
And you started to see Brady pick it up and elevating. But I agree, this team. Kind of when I look at this situation, I look at could they have competed? What other years would they have been the dominant in other years? And I think so. I think this is a team that could have won in other years as well. Well, they did, but constructed specifically just like this. But I think it's because of the way what they did on defense, in my opinion, as to how they closed on defense and what they did in the playoffs on defense, and of course what they did on defense in the Super Bowl. Now, I will say that Brady always gave them the lead. And then they then they gave that up against Seattle with another weird catch down the end there. But and then you had the Malcolm Butler play. But I agree with you, for all the reasons you said and the numbers that you put
So,
out.
Chris,
So-
I'm getting old. I confuse years. So I said Deflategate. Deflategate was 16. So I said at the beginning it was.
Well, it
14.
happened at
It was not 14.
15.
Happened
Yeah,
at
yeah,
15,
you're right.
but he gets
Yeah,
suspended
because that was
16.
against Tennessee,
Yeah.
right?
He
That
gets
game was against
suspended. Yeah,
Tennessee.
he
I
gets
apologize,
suspended in
too.
16. I also made a mistake.
Right.
I said
Yeah.
14. I made a mistake because you confused the years. It's been so. Think
It
about
is.
this. It was a
They-
20-year run.
The Deflategate game was against Tennessee in
And
the
yeah.
playoffs as well. So you're right. Joe, who did you have at number 4?
I put in the 2018 team when they won against the Rams there. And just because it was, it was an average win, but it was the Rams are coming off a huge Monday night win against the Chiefs. And as you know, Chiefs are always one of those teams in our division that, always is something to a hurdle for us anyways. And so, the Rams come out on top. So Rams going into that Super Bowl. And I think that whole season kind of was that sort of same idea was, we're always kind of fighting back, even though we're on top, but them coming in with that momentum and still pulling it out because it wasn't that much of an exciting Super Bowl. But I think that's the reason why it was, because it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of defensive moments in that game, especially. But I think that was what made this team a better team for me, because they battled that sort of same thing all season long. And so it was one of those things where to still come out on top with a meek win just goes to show that it's there were changes happening and they still fought through and still made their presence known as one of the best. You know what I mean?
Chris, that team, Joe, you're right, Joe. That team reinvented themselves, right?
Yeah.
They hit a stretch mid-season where that 18 team struggled, remember? And then all of a sudden they reinvented themselves. And I think, listen, yes, Brady, great. But that was a Belichick, Chris. Okay, we're not going to win playing this style. We have to play to our strength. What's our strength? Ball control, running the ball with guys like Sonny Michel and Burkhead, defense. And he almost went back to, Chris, the formula from 02 and 03 and 01 and 04. That particular team, he reinvented them at the second half of that season because everybody thought that they were done. They were finished. They were washed up. He reinvents himself. They play. I believe they blew out the Chargers at home, right? In that 18 season. And then they get to Kansas City. At Kansas City, Joe, in the AFC Championship. And nobody gives them a chance. And everybody's expecting what they've been doing the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. And they reinvent themselves again. And Brady starts chucking it because he realizes we ain't winning this game playing defense and running the ball against Mahomes, because at some point Mahomes is going to catch fire, which he does, right? And Brady, Chris, in the second half of that game and even in overtime, puts together some of the best drives we've seen in a long time, right?
Yeah. So, again, I'm with you. It's not the most spectacular team. And the only thing I'll say is the last thing, quick, is that's where Kraft may have said, I'll believe in Belichick more than Brady. That's the Super Bowl that did it. That got Brady out the door because they did it with defense.
Interesting point, Chris. Interesting.
Because they did it with defense.
Interesting point.
He didn't throw for a ton of yards. So, okay, guys, good. We have number 5. We have number 4 in the books. This portion of the Pats Nation was presented by CORSO Law Group, CORSOLawGroup.com. And we come back on to talk number 3. Stick around.
No one ever thinks they will be in need of a criminal or traffic lawyer, but things happen. CORSO Law Group is Arizona's leading criminal and traffic law firm. Their 20-plus years experience and attention to detail has helped thousands of people who found themselves in a situation in Arizona. Whether it's a traffic ticket or more serious issue, talk with these expert attorneys. CORSOLawGroup.com.
Back in with Pat's Nation with Corso and Catone, Sundays 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern. Okay, so getting down to number 3 now. Now, we're probably going to have similar teams on this, so feel free to elaborate.
Oh, you guys probably.
Similar teams. Who knows what Joe's coming with this?
Yeah.
I don't know where Joe's.
Well, Mark prefaced some of this show by telling us we're going to be surprised by some things he's going to come up with, so we'll see. So, Mark, let's get to you. Number 3.
Number 3, I have the 2016 team.
Wow.
Let me get my notes out about them because they're the ones who just made it off the list. Go ahead.
Okay, so they were 14-2. They were the number 3 scoring offense in the league. They were the number 1 scoring defense in the league.
Mm-hmm.
They had no Gronk because Gronk only played 8 games that year. That was his suspension year. Brady's suspension year.
Yeah.
Brady comes back from suspension, and like I said, they go 14-2. That was the team, or that was the Super Bowl, and that was the year that cements him as the GOAT. He shuts the door on Montana, locks it. He's down, he's the GOAT. But that particular team, Chris, I don't think gets the credit for doing it without Gronk. They were dominant. Brady was dominant. They just had a chip on their shoulder all year. That team, like I said, number 3 scoring offense in the league, number 1 scoring defense in the league. That team was dominant. But everyone ever focuses on is the 28, they come back against Atlanta.
Yeah.
But that team dominated all year. Like, that team was the best team in football after Brady came back pretty much all season. Like, nobody pushed them. And then they got to the Super Bowl. Okay, yeah, I get what happened with Atlanta. But that's the team I feel as though, in my opinion, I thought I was going to give you some surprises now with these top 5.
It's not really a surprise. It really isn't now that I'm hearing you.
That's the team, Chris, that I think people lose sight of. That team dominated. They dominated.
My surprise is that it's at number 3 for you. I got him.
Go ahead.
I got him somewhere else. So,
as you talk about them, okay, I'm looking at this team and I'm looking closer at the numbers, and I see the 14-2, and I see number 1 for defense. And here's why I, and I didn't have him on my list. I had him at 5, and then I put 85 in, and that may have been a sentimental thing for me to put 85 on this list instead of. I may have fallen into that trap instead of this team.
That's okay.
But you're right. It was sneaky. They were sneaky good. See, because there's no Pro Bowlers on this team. I mean, they're the number 1 offense in football, but you got just Tom Brady. That's it. Who makes the Pro Bowl? You don't have and on defense they had Hightower and McCourty. That and I will argue that without Hightower, they don't win that. They don't win that Super Bowl.
Nope.
No,
they don't. They absolutely don't.
But I'm with you. I mean, this was a team that, if you factor in the adversity, and this is something I didn't, the 4 games, and I kind of didn't put that into play here for a minute. The 4-game suspension and the way they held it together. Would they go 3-1 in that stretch?
3-1. So when
they had
Brady
to,
comes back,
because
Chris, they lose one game.
They
all
lost
year.
one game.
And
all
forget,
year.
Gronk didn't play the last 8 games, and Gronk didn't play in the playoffs. Who was Brady's security blanket?
I will tell you this. To me, this is a team. This is one of those teams that put it all together.
Yeah.
On both sides of the ball. So I guess you could say they're one of the most complete teams. So why the hell isn't this on my list?
One of those teams that,
I think Chris 85 is sentimental for you. I get it. I get it. I knew 85 was going
I
to
mean,
be on your list.
I couldn't put them over the 3-2-1 team that I have on this list.
No, I get that.
I couldn't do it, but
get
why I
that.
would put 14 over this team? I think maybe because 14 started up the second wave, the second
It did.
dynasty, so to
Yeah.
speak.
It did.
But this 16 team, you're right. When you really dive into the numbers, this was as dominant of a team as you could possibly have. Honestly, I mean, you look at the wins and you look at who they played. Well, that was one of the reasons too about the way the league was that year. I didn't think the league was all that great that particular year.
Mhm.
You Denver kind of going out.
Yep.
Baltimore really wasn't. The AFC East, Kansas City hadn't really emerged yet as that team. And then on the other side of the equation, I mean, Christ, Atlanta got in to the Super Bowl. So, it wasn't, you know what I mean? It seemed like an easier road for them. And I think that's why. So
That wasn't that another year, another Aaron Rodgers choke job that year?
yeah, he's which you could count on every year.
So Joe, who was your 3 before Chris goes?
Before Chris goes, my 3 was the 2014 team. And for all the obvious stats that you've already mentioned because of the team, because you had them previous, but the one thing about this team is this was the moment, obviously, when Butler makes his catch in the Super Bowl. They beat the Seahawks. Carroll makes the dumbest move of coaching history
don't believe that.
and not make Marshawn Lynch run the ball. But the fact that Butler caught that ball and you saw, obviously who they panned to and they cut to immediately is Brady and his reaction. And the fact that his reaction was like he left it up to the team and the team came out on top. And that is why that team because it came down to a team member, not Brady or the offense, or it came down to a team player came in, made the play, did the job, quote unquote. You know what I mean? And so it becomes one of it signifies the Patriots as a unit from all other Patriot teams, I think. You know what I mean?
I get you.
Everything after with Butler going out was like ridiculous, but that's my reason.
Well, I'm changing my 2014 to 2016. How's that? I'm changing my number 4. Not 2016.
You can't do that. Oh, come on.
All right, here's my number 3. The 2003. I'm surprised, Mark, that you don't have 3, 2, and 1 the same. But the 2003 Patriots. Okay.
To who? 03?
2003.
Okay.
Yeah, the 03 Patriots.
Yep.
They went 14-2. They were 12th in the league. Again, this was during that time where they weren't the, dominant offense that you think of. This was the team that did a lot more with a lot less on offense. I will say that, but they went 14-2. This started that time when you couldn't, once the end of October hit, you couldn't beat this team. Like you certainly weren't beating them at Gillette. They didn't lose. I don't think they lost a game at home that season. Did they, Mark?
No, they didn't.
I don't think they lost a game at home.
I don't believe they did either. No.
So that was during a time where you couldn't win a game in Gillette Stadium, and the Patriots didn't lose after Halloween, pretty much.
No, in those days, no.
And it started that 21 in a row win streak. It started in 03 and went into 04 where they lost against Pittsburgh. But it started at 21 in a row. I don't think people really understand
Forgot about that.
how difficult that is to do, to win 21 games in a row. Now, it spanned over 2 seasons, but nevertheless. So they were 14-2. They were number 1 in defense. This was the start of those 3 years, those 03, 04, 05 seasons of dominant defense. Where you had the Rodney Harrison and Law and McGinnis and Brewski and the list goes on and on and on. Seymour and Christ, it was ridiculous what they did on defense against teams. They allowed they allowed 14 points. They only allowed 14 points a game on average. I mean, that's pretty dominant right there. And so what they did against Manning in playoff game. You know, how they just
Ty
and-
Law
and-
had 3 picks, didn't he, in the AFC Championship
Ty Law
game?
had 3 picks. You mentioned that before. And so they had, defensive Pro Bowlers. And so that was the team, and that was still Patriot way. That was team oriented. So when I look at the top 5 Patriot teams, yeah, that 03, Mark. What do you think of that team?
No, that was listen. I had to make a cut somewhere, and when you see my other 2 teams, I had to make a cut somewhere, and I really was close to putting that team on. Believe it or not, it was the 16 team I had on this list. I was actually struggling between the 01 team and that 03 team. I was going to put 03 on the list and not put 01. And as I started to think more about that 01 team, I put them on. I guess I could have replaced maybe 14 with 03.
It's tough. It's hard. This is tough.
It's tough, but
it depends on who you think is which offensively, defensively. See, I'm a defensive guy.
Right.
So
right.
you're going to see these teams on there because of how
Yeah.
dominant they were on defense. You're more of an offensive guy.
Well, no, but none of the I am. You know I like offense, but that 01 team, Chris, was not offense, right? But I did put them on the list, even though they weren't
true.
offense.
Yeah,
they weren't offense. So yeah, I could see 03. I know who's coming next for you, but that's all right.
We'll see.
They're gonna be in the top 2. I don't know if they're 1, but they're gonna be based on 03. They're gonna be in your top 2.
Well, if it's not for you, then it's upsetting. I'm going to be upset all around if you're not. If this next team at 2 isn't listed in there. So, we're going to get to that right after the break. So, this portion of the Pats Nation was presented by CORSO CATONE, Saturdays, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. It's the real deal New England Field sports. It's passion. It is the real deal New England Field. Hey, when we come back, we're going to talk our number 2 Patriots team of all time. Stick around.
Mark, I'm serious. I think I lost my mind.
Certainly, it was an exciting show.
I want Murray.
What?
That's
crap?
it.
What is wrong with
Get him on this damn
you?
show.
Lost your mind tonight.
That's all I have to say.
Lost your mind.
What are you writing now?
So I'm working over here. You're talking about nonsense. I'm working.
That's why we are the real deal New England Field. It's going to be real.
Back in with more CORSO and Catone. All right, Mark, let's jump to number 2.
So
I see you still looking down at your sheet. You're like, you know what you're doing right now. You're thinking and thinking.
No,
Jesus
I
Christ,
didn't know.
should
I'm
have
not
this
changing.
thing?
I am not changing.
Going to
I'm not
number 1,
changing.
the 85
I'm not
team.
changing. My team, number 2, right along, was the 2007 Patriots. I'm
You
not
guys
changing.
are ahead of me.
I'm not changing. Now, it's controversial because they didn't win a ring. They didn't win a trophy. They didn't win a ring. So can they be an all-time Patriot team without winning a Super Bowl? That's a discussion we can have. I don't know if they can be. I don't know.
Well, I got 2 of those on my list. So,
so I don't know if they can be. But listen, Chris, that team defeated their first 8 opponents by 204 points. Just think about that for a minute. They beat their first 8 opponents by 204 points. I don't know if people comprehend just how dominant that team really was. They averaged 36.8 points a game. Okay. They were 16-0, obviously, in the regular season. Brady throws for 4,800 yards, 50 touchdowns. Moss breaks the all-time receiving record for touchdowns. He still holds it. What was it, 23 that year, Chris?
it was he caught 23. Yeah.
23?
It was 20 it was 22 held by I thought it was 21 held by Jerry Rice, and then he hit 22. Nah, it couldn't have been. I think he had 23 touchdowns, and I think that was regular season. You're right.
Yeah. And
But it was Rice who had it. Yeah.
It was Rice who had it. So that team, Chris, they turned it on when it was just ridiculous. Like, I remember the game in Miami where it was just like they're down in Miami and Brady just like taps his leg and's looking over at Moss, and he's just throwing the ball up. And Moss, it was ridiculous. And the announcers were going crazy because Moss is just running under balls. And it was like Miami was defenseless. It was defenseless against that team. And so they get into the playoffs, and the pressure started mounting on that team. And you knew the pressure started mounting when they beat the Chargers. They didn't dominate in that AFC Championship game against the Chargers. Phillip Rivers was hurt. Remember, Rivers got hurt.
He played on like an ACL.
He played on an ACL.
Yeah.
But the Patriots didn't blow them out of the water. The Patriots didn't score 50. You could tell as you were getting closer now to the perfect season.
Was that the interception that then Troy Brown took back?
It may have been. Listen,
At the end of that game where they picked off Brady and then Troy Brown took it away from him?
It may have been. It may have been. No, that was the game at San Diego that Troy Brown took it away from him because we were losing that game.
Oh, that was at San Diego.
That was at San Diego, and San Diego had to lead the whole game.
Yeah, because we had home field throughout. Go ahead.
We had home field out. But the pressure was mounting, Chris, at that point. And you could tell it was mounting. It was mounting. And then you get to the Super Bowl. And you're right, though, Chris. Brady, typical Brady, takes him down, puts him in the lead late in the game. Moss makes it because of the pressure that the Giants were putting on Brady with just 4 guys. Moss struggled in that game because they were blanketing him because they knew they could get pressure with 4 guys. But Brady hits him to take the lead. And I'm not going to get into the helmet catch and David Tyree and all this other nonsense.
I hate Asante Samuel.
Right? Yeah. Asante Samuel makes the pick. It's over. 17, and we're undefeated. We're the greatest team in the history of football without question for one season. But anyway, and we're not going to get into the non-calls, holding calls, and everything else on the Giants' last drive.
In the grasp? Get into it. I don't care. Go ahead.
The last drive, but the helmet catch in the grasp.
Yeah, that drive. He was in the grasp. Yeah.
It was everything. Anything you could have. They just got every break there was. And I know Giant fans are going to say, that's sour grapes. But it's the truth, right?
That was a friggin' sack. Are you kidding me? Eli Manning was sacked.
And even if they didn't call that a sack, Chris, bullshit. Thomas, the linebacker, Adelius Thomas, is coming around, and the guy tackles him. How was he physically pulled him, tackled? It was blatant in front of the ref. No flag. Never mind the in the grass. That's irregardless of that. It's a blatant tackle of a defensive player, and they don't throw the flag. So there's a few different things that happened there. And then, of course, the real reason why we lost this game in 07 for the fans. For the fans on 790 The Score.
Cut his mic right now.
The reason we're not the greatest one-season team in the history of football is thanks to my partner, CORSO and Catone. Well, it's CORSO. Because Chris has a routine, and you'll learn this during football season, people on 790, when we do our
Pats Nation Sundays, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, when we do our pregame show on Sunday mornings, you'll learn this. But he's got a routine that he does every single Sunday. It's down to the minute what he does pregame to get ready for the start of the game and how he watches the game. So he takes a perfect season and he decides he's going to go to the Super Bowl like one of these imbecile fans that goes to these games. You can't see nothing. The seats are terrible, whatever. Because it was in Arizona, he goes. If that game was played somewhere else, we're undefeated. But no. And this almost sounds like a Catone's comment. When he goes to the game, and what happens? They lose. They lose. Why? Because he was there in person, and that's why we lost. So I don't want to hear about play breakdowns. I don't want to hear about anything. That's why we lost that game.
First of all, who's your number 2?
No.
My number 2 is the 07 team, obviously.
No. Listen, you know what? You know what? Okay, shut up now. Listen, first of all, okay, we went back and forth on this all week. I'll never forget this because you never let me hear the end of this. Okay, you and I went back and forth all friggin' week that week, and you were like, first you were like, nah, you can't do that. Then you're like, I said, look, the Super Bowl's in my backyard over here in Arizona. How the hell can I not see them play in the Super Bowl? And you're like, yeah, you said, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think
No.
you gave me the at the end of that whole thing. You gave me the blessing to do it.
Absolutely not.
First of all,
Absolutely not.
okay,
I said to you,
you know
if
what?
you want to do it,
You're so
do it.
revisionist.
Then I would never do it.
You are so revisionist. But I can tell you, you know, yeah, I guess it was my fault, wasn't it? So I've been,
Just for the
I've never
record,
been able to forgive myself. Listen,
just
you
for the
Patriots fans
record.
out there, I've never been able to forgive myself for it. Just know I've beat the hell out of myself every damn day since that. I wake up and I remember it. So
Do you know how
and
many times?
You
Do
guys,
you know how many times they've shown that game on NFL
million.
Network as the
million.
NFL's greatest games? And Chris has never watched a minute of it.
I've never watched
Ever.
one
Ever.
single thing to
Ever.
do with 07. The only thing I've ever watched was in the Dynasty. They talked about a little bit, and I had to for the show. But even that, I turned it off, and Mark had to fill me in on some things. I've never, ever watched the game. I've never watched anything to do with the game. Anytime they show highlights, I run out of the room or I turn the channel. And when I say run out of the room, literally run out of the room, okay? The scene in that stadium, I can't describe it to you. Okay. It was Patriots fans crying, just like beside themselves. And as that game built, okay, and grew and got, see, the Giants fans coming in didn't think they had a chance. They didn't think. So they were just kind of, and you could, they were all around us and they, drinking, whatever, just having a good time. And then as the game went, they started the Boston, New York thing started. And it started. And the obnoxious nonsense started coming out of them. Okay. And it just got to a point where the tension was so great, fights, people getting thrown around all over the place. My brother said, I had to get out of there because if I don't leave now, I'm going to get arrested. Okay. And this is what the scene was like. And we got picked up from that game and we were told, I've never seen faces so down than I saw you that day. I was told it was ugly. It was terrible. I never want to relive that. It was horrible. Thank you for bringing that up, Mark.
Well,
I have to bring that up if I'm bringing up the 017.
I did a lot of bad things that day. I had a section of the wall already picked out for stuff. Ugh, God. What, Joe?
Joe, who's your second?
Well, I have the 2016 team as my number 2. And
Okay. All right.
So you guys are always jumping ahead. I don't know why I'm curious to know what your ones are because you guys keep jumping ahead and going about all these teams that I have near the top.
Give it so I could give my number 2. Go ahead.
Well, I think the culmination of what you said, Mark, earlier about Brady. That was the year that he became the GOAT, but not only just because of the Falcons' comeback, but we forget about like the one guy who kind of led them there that you didn't talk about, which I was surprised, is LeGarrette Blount had his best season ever. And it was the first time you saw Brady can take anyone and go. And that was basically he was giving you the template to when he went to Tampa. He's just picking up these old guys, picking up people who were good.
They had a lot of talent in Tampa.
Yeah, but like that's what I'm saying. But
I can't even believe he brought up Tampa on this show.
But
we're talking about top 5 Patriot teams of all time, and he's bringing up the Creepsicles
you guys,
and that cartoon character.
He's blaming me for 07. You're bringing up Tampa. I'm quitting.
Well, listen, 07 is legit. 07 is a legitimate thing. Tampa, he throw him off the show. Tampa.
But 2016 though, that just shows how Brady had that he could just do that, implement those things. People like
I get it. I agree with that.
You know what I mean?
agree with that.
And definitely the comeback is like the GOAT all day long.
So mine is going to be the 04 Patriots. Okay, which then tells you who I had at number 1.
Okay.
The 04 Patriots. Look, again, I had put 03 at number 3, so therefore I had to put in 04 because to me those were like one team. You know, you started the 21 game winning streak in 03 and it went into 04. Once again, couldn't win in New England after October. Couldn't do it. Impossible. Not in New England. You couldn't beat the Patriots after October. Period. End of story. They lost 2 games that year, neither one of which was at home. Remember when Gillette Stadium was impossible to win there?
Yeah.
And the reason I picked them over 03 for number 2 is how dominant the offense became. Okay. They were 4th now in the league in offense at that versus 12th in 03. And they were number 2 again in defense. They were unbelievable on defense as always. They made Peyton Manning look pedestrian, seriously pedestrian. They made him look silly every time they played him. Okay. The defense did. You had Pro Bowlers, on defense up and down because they deserved that, those guys. There were some guys that didn't make the Pro Bowl that should have made the Pro Bowl. In my opinion, there were Pro Bowls up and down. Again, Tom Brady and Corey Dillon were the only ones that made the Pro Bowl. But again, done as a team. Brady picked them up. Brady made guys better, as I said. They get into that Super Bowl. That was the one against Philly. Okay,
Philly.
Donovan McNabb,
Philly Super Bowl.
who got sick or whatever happened to him. And it didn't really turn. It was the first Super Bowl that it didn't come down to a field goal. Like they had to get a stop on defense, something they couldn't do in 07, but they did it. Rodney Harrison, I think, had the pick and did that Eagle thing.
Yep.
But they were just so dominant all season long. One of the 2 losses was against Pittsburgh to end the 21 game winning streak. But they just weren't going to be beat. You knew they were going to repeat. There was never a time in that season where you said, I don't know, I'm a little concerned here. Not once, not ever, not like the other years, and to me, that's why they're number 2. Dominant, up and down, coaching, playing, everything, in my opinion. That was 04. You got anything to say about, well, you may have something to say about 04 coming up, so we don't know that. So we'll see. So this portion of the Pats Nation was presented by Corso Law Group, corsolawgroup.com. And when we come back, our number ones, I think you can guess, but we'll see. No flipping.
No one ever thinks they will be in need of a criminal or traffic lawyer, but things happen. Corso Law Group is Arizona's leading criminal and traffic law firm. Their 20-plus years experience and attention to detail has helped thousands of people who found themselves in a situation in Arizona. Whether it's a traffic ticket or more serious issue, talk with these expert attorneys. CorsoLawGroup.com.
Back in with more Corso and Catone, the real deal New England feel. All right, we're back. We're up to our number 1 mark. So this is where overlap starts, right? Where we start talking about different teams and all of that. So
you get this.
All right.
Far,
well,
right?
listen. Since we just talked,
your own. Do you have the same number 1? You think?
No, we don't.
No.
No, because of what we just talked about.
Oh,
yeah.
In the previous segment. Because I now know who his number 1 is, and he now knows who my number 1 is now.
Yeah.
So, Joe, do you want to give yours really quick?
No, it's not going to be really quick, but yeah, I could. My number 1's going to be 2000.
Well, don't drag on. We got to end the show, and
my number 1's 2007 for all the things Mark had said.
Yeah. Well,
which again, I was like, why is it not your 1? But because I come from, after the 85 loss, I started to look for a new team. That's where Joe Montana comes in. You guys always bust my chops, but the idea behind that offense. And teams
starts to look for a new team.
I start to look.
He's actually producing this show.
Yep,
that's terrible.
Right. This is how Hollywood begins. But seeing a team like that,
you were only 8 in 85. So
I
get it. I understand. You started rooting for San Fran when you were 8 years old. That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, but here's okay.
No, it's one of those things where the idea. I think I joined Mark in the idea that I like that offensive style, and teams like the Niners and Dallas at the time and Aikman, those types of teams. This 07 team was the first time in Patriot history where you saw a team like that. They didn't have the running back as your 1, 2, and 3, because I always think it's like you get the 1 wide receiver who's the guy, the 1 running back who's the guy, and they didn't quite have that, but they did have a solid all-around offense, and that's my team. That's what they should be doing every year to be all awesome.
All right. So, Mark, I'm sorry, Joe. We gotta go, but
Do it.
we're running out of time. Go ahead.
We got plenty of time. Let Joe finish his thought.
Yeah, I don't want to hear. You know what, Joe? I'm pissed off at you right now. That's
Good.
why I don't want you to finish.
Whoa!
I'm pissed off at you.
Okay.
Okay.
So my number,
And I think I'm
you
getting
want
the
me to-
timing all wrong on the show anyway. So never mind. Go ahead. Who's your
You
number
are.
one?
You
I
are.
am getting
Do you
all
want?
wrong
Do
on
you
what I'm
want
doing.
me to go? Okay, I want to go.
Yeah, you go first. The hell with it.
Okay, 1985 Patriots.
What?
I'm joking.
Wait a minute.
I'm
Hold on
I'm
a second.
I'm
Attaboy.
joking.
No,
I'm joking.
Joe, I thought he
I'm
was
joking.
serious for a second.
I'm-
For a
I'm
second,
joking.
I would have
I'm
loved that.
joking. I'm joking. Joe would have loved it.
Wait,
No,
I'm Joe. I'm so mad at you.
he's still mad, Joe.
Listen, when I give my number one, Joe, I want you to pop back in with some of the other points on the team. But go ahead.
Okay.
So my number one Patriot team of all time is the 2004 Patriots.
Hmm.
Now, and Joe, Chris, you got into a lot of this 2004 team, okay? But listen, yes, they repeated. It was a 2-year dominant run like this league probably. I mean, yeah, you could talk about the Steelers and those teams when they repeated, but and you could talk about the 49ers,
The modern era,
right?
though.
But the modern era of football where there was free agency and there was roster turnover, and this team was the modern era, right? And this 04 team, to your point, Chris, continued the streak. Yeah, they lost to Pittsburgh to end the streak. But there was no doubt from the beginning, opening game, this was the team to beat. They had the target on their back. Nobody could beat them. They finished 14-2. You brought up the offense. Corey, you brought up Corey Dillon. Corey Dillon had 1,635 yards.
Right.
Yeah.
And 12 touchdowns. He was a workhorse. If fourth quarter, you had the lead, lights out, it was over because you just turned and gave it to Corey, and he was a workhorse. Right? That team was it was lights out once that you got to that point because nobody could hit the offensive line. They were just a complete football team, in my opinion. They were just the complete team.
I think that's Belichick's defense, that team.
That team was about, yeah. Chris mentioned all the Pro Bowlers had up and down that defense. But the other thing I'm going to go with this, Chris, that team in its totality might have had, I believe did have, and this was the end of that era, the best coaching staff, one of the best coaching staffs, probably the best in the history of football. They had Belichick head coach, Charlie Weiss as offensive coordinator, and Romeo Crennel as defensive coordinator. And the three of them hugged at the end of that Super Bowl, and because they knew that was the end of that era. And that triumphant of three guys, Chris, it just, it's unbelievable. And I put 04 ahead of 07 for one reason.
The Super Bowl.
They finished the job. And 07, as great as they were, didn't finish the job. And you can't be the number one Patriot team of all time with all our success if you didn't finish the job. This 04 team didn't just finish the job. They dominated and they kicked people in the face to finish the job. And the 07 team had the curse of Chris Corso in 07.
You suck for that. Hey, listen, you mentioned the coaching staff of that team. Not only that,
Right.
but guys that went on to be head coaches. And I think, pretty good football minds in this league, that being
Rabel.
Josh McDaniels, who was the quarterback's coach at the time, Brian Flores, who was a scouting assistant. You had, I forget Patricia, I don't know. But you had Eric Mangini for defensive backs.
was on that team, right?
Well, Skonecki has always been, he was a fixture. So, I mean, the coaching staff was incredible.
and
I'm
then
with
the player,
you.
Rabel becomes a head coach, Chris. He's on that team.
The players that became coaches as well. Yeah, I mean, that team, like I said, I had to put them together. See, I'm surprised by that you wouldn't put them because they were like one team.
They were one team, but the 04 team to me, Chris, was on another level. They matured even more and became even more of that. Like the 03 team, Chris, didn't necessarily have the target on their back at the very beginning. 04, we had a target from the day one of practice. The entire league wanted the Patriots.
So, listen. So, Joe, what do you got on 04? You mentioned it a little bit. What are your thoughts on 04 before we get to my one?
What do you mean? My 04 was I picked them for number 5 as
He
my.
had them 5.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, why wouldn't you have that team higher?
Yeah, well, I think it's for those other reasons. I think like there's certain team elements, certain team type of elements that I look for in teams where they were so dominant. And yeah, you guys probably right. The balance of this team was potentially one of the greater moments of them all. But I looked at single moments that other people shine in other areas that became 3-2-1, that sort of thing too. You know what I mean?
So
Chris,
my number
tell us
one,
about 07.
my number one's 07. Okay. I understand what you're saying about the Super Bowl. You didn't finish the job. You can't, but I don't know how the hell, if you're looking at a top Patriots team of all time, how the hell can you not have? Look, this
Right.
team was flooded, okay, with Pro Bowlers. I mean, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actual Pro Bowlers on offense, and you had 3 to 4 of them on defense. I mean, this team, I've never seen a team in all of my years in football, watching football, looking at football, and the way I grade this too, I put this team today. I'll put this team against any team in football in history.
I agree with that.
And talking about even Kansas City today, screw you, Kansas City.
Whoa!
Okay, I'll put the 07 team against the Kansas City Chiefs. Who was their best team? What, 19 maybe? Who was their best Kansas City team?
Maybe
They
19,
would wipe
18,
the
19.
field with the
Oh,
Kansas
yeah.
City Chiefs. They would wipe their ass for them. Okay, the 07 team. And most of those teams, I think the tension got to them. I do.
Well, I tell you this, I heard this from inside information that one of the guys who worked at the pro shop would travel with the team. And basically that team won the Super Bowl before they even got to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of partying the night before. And you go, okay, you can't do that until you go in there and win the game. You got to actually win the game first. So
Right.
I think that was had something to do with it. It give you some relief? No,
it does. Listen, yeah. To me again, and I get that, and that was all that tension, that built up stuff, and
You could see the pressure. Like I said, the San Diego game, you could see the pressure was mounting.
I will tell you this: there is no team, and listen, I get it; they didn't finish the job, but there's no team that will ever go 16-0. There's no team that will go 18-1 ever again,
Chris,
ever.
No, they won't. But Chris, you were in the stadium. You went to the game.
Yeah.
And I called you.
Yeah.
And you could barely hear the game. It was just before the kickoff. And I said, Chris, we're losing. And he started swearing at me. I said, I saw Brady come out of the tunnel. I said, he doesn't have that look that he usually has. He doesn't look right. He looks like there's a lot, the pressure hit him. Just his face. Remember?
Yes, you did.
You're full of shit.
Well, maybe that. Listen, maybe that was the jinx. You saying they weren't going to win?
Maybe I didn't like his look. I said to Chris, something's not. He don't look like Brady. He's nervous. He never looked nervous to me. He looked nervous.
See, that's the problem with talking about the 07 team, and I get why. That all anyone ever focuses on is a Super Bowl, which I get. You have to because
you have to.
Damn it, the perfect season down the toilet. Mm-hmm. I get that. But when you go back and you look at the best teams of all time for the Patriots, you scale that back to the whole season. Damn, man. There were games that you're like, I never thought they would lose a game once it got to a certain point. I'm like, they just can't lose. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And every ranking, everything. Well, you said 4,800 yards he had, 50 touchdowns. No, Peyton Manning then broke it, but geez, Mark,
Moss wasn't even in his prime. He was past it a little bit.
I know.
He was past what he could have.
You were split. I'm splitting hairs. I put 04 above 07, right? I just did it because I knew you were doing 07. I figured Joe would do 07. So I think, you know what? 04 won the ring. And
I'll tell you this real
team.
quick, and then I want you to finish. If that were the second decade Brady, I don't think they would have lost that game.
No, they wouldn't have. They wouldn't have lost that game. You're right. They wouldn't have lost it. They wouldn't have.
So finish the point. Finish the thought on 07.
My 07, great team. But listen, the one team I wanted to put in this that I didn't, I was going to put them at 5, the 1976 New England Patriots get screwed in Oakland. They called
that
roughing
phantom
the pass up on Sugar Bear Hamilton. And I'm going to make the prediction. If you beat Oakland, that 76 team would have won the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. That was that phantom roughing the passer call. That was bullshit. That was BS.
We got screwed in Oakland.
Say it.
That's how crazy we are. We're talking about 76.
Guys, this was a lot of fun. Today. We want to hear what you think in Heated Hotline, so make sure you call us, email us, and come back to the Pats Nation. Listen, it's all Patriots all the time, and anything you bring to the table, we will be ready. We are the Pats Nation. See you next week.